Bringing people and communities together on seclosounds.org.
Your listening station. I hear a wind whistling air, whispering in my
Welcome to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. You can contact the show via facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show or via Twitter, which is @holiday_hut. This week's show is a special on the RAF Museum down in Hendon in North London. I'll be speaking to David Keane, who will be taking me around a couple of the hangars and explaining what the planes are and what they did. Plus one or two bits of travel news. All coming up on this edition of the John Guinn Travel Show. Hello again to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. As I mentioned, today would be mostly a special on the RAF Museum in Hendon and North London. But first I just want to start with a little bit of travel news which will be of interest for you who want to travel to the States after July. On July 26th, the US Embassy in London and the Consulate General in Belfast will transition to an e-visa information and an appointment booking system, which includes an online appointment booking service for non-immigrant visa applications. This system is actually being implemented worldwide. It's provided through a link from the US Embassy's London website at http://london.usembassy.gov, or you can go to usvisa-info.com. Until close of business on July the 25th, the current operator assisted information service will still be in place. Travellers requiring visa information or information on scheduling a non-immigrant visa interview should call 09042 450 100. This is actually a very expensive thing to do because calls are roughly £1.23 a minute plus any network extras. This operator assisted information service will schedule non-immigrant visa appointments up to and including July 26. Travellers requiring appointments for August and beyond will be required to wait until the new appointment booking service comes into operation on July the 26th. Nationals of the 37 Visa Waiver Programme VWP countries, which includes British citizens, should check their eligibility to enter the United States visa-free under the VWP, and if entering the United States by air or sea carrier, obtain travel authorisation under the Electronic System for Travel Authorisation, which is ESTA, prior to travel. If you are qualified for this, the ESTA or ESTA, then you don't need a visa. But if you've ever been arrested for anything, not necessarily charged, just arrested, then the chances are you're going to need a visa. And until this system comes in, it did mean making a very expensive phone call. Hopefully, this new system will make it easier and cheaper for those who do need a visa to get an appointment and get the process running. So if you're thinking about going to America and you may need a visa, it might be worth waiting until the end of July to save you having to make an expensive phone call. But we'll just have to see how it goes. So that's the new visa appointment system coming out from the United States Embassy. So for the main part of the show. Last week I popped down to the RAF Museum in Hendon to be shown around some of the exhibits by David Keane, who's one of the curators. We had a stroll round and he showed various planes to me and the history. Because it's an open museum, there is some background noise of other visitors, so please bear with that. And sometimes the sound goes a little bit tinny. Maybe it's the acoustics. Or maybe, more likely, it's the fact I can't really handle a microphone. But anyway, we had a look round, saw some great planes. It's a very interesting place to go to. And this is what David had to say.
We're in the historic hangars. This is a hangar which was put up by the Royal Naval Air Service in 1917. There are two like this, and they form the core part of our original museum building. We opened in 1972, and this was the museum, this hangar and the one just beyond it. The space in between was roofed over, and on the outside we've got a facade which was architect designed to make it look more like a museum and less like an aircraft hangar. So we have a mixture of aeroplanes in here. We're in the jets area at the moment, right next door to the Lightning, the RAF's first and only supersonic fighter. And on the opposite side is the jet trainer of the day, the Jet Provost, and that particular Jet Provost was the one in which Prince Charles learned to fly jets. Just beyond them is the Canberra, in service for a very long time and powered by two Rolls-Royce Avons. Beyond the jet area we have fighters in the middle of the hall, and then beyond that our rotorcraft, mainly helicopters but also an autogyro, the RAF overseas and the maritime role, the RAF's business over water.
With the trainer in front of us, how easy is that to fly?
I've never flown one, so
No.
I can't speak from experience. It had the advantage of being side-by-side seating, so the instructor could keep a very close eye on what you were doing. Prince Charles's instructor was Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Johns, who was was the chairman of our trustees for a long time. So yes, it was it was a relatively easy aeroplane to fly. In fact, in some ways, it was too easy. And it was very kind at the point of stall, which is when an aircraft's wings no longer work and it falls out the sky. But that's no good for student pilots because you need them to be able to cope with a stall situation where it's a bit more unkind to you. So, quite interestingly, if we go forward, you can see that on the leading edges of the wing, it has something which we don't normally associate with aircraft construction. And this is covered with concrete. And there's a thin layer of cement there, which is a rough surface, which is again the opposite of what you want on an aerodynamic shape, but it breaks up the airflow, so that at the point of stall, the aircraft actually is a bit more unkind to the pilot. Deliberately put on because it flew too well in a way.
So it's a modification?
A modification, yes, in the light of its service experience. Now, because we'd like to let people into our aircraft, but it's not possible for all sorts of reasons, not least because of the conservation that soon wear out. However, we do have a spare jet provost. There it is. Hasn't got any wings, but people can get into the cockpit and pretend they're flying it.
That's quite a snug fit.
It is a snug fit, but it's a lot more comfortable than a lot of the cockpits of aircraft that you'll find in this museum, and even the very large aircraft are very tight inside the cockpit. I suppose, notably the Lancaster. If I sit in the pilot seat of a Lancaster, I can't stretch my right hand out fully to the right. There's just not enough room. And the largest bomber used by the Royal Air Force, the Avro Vulcan, huge aeroplane, massive wingspan. We have one in our bomber hall, but the cockpit is tiny.
Is that the Delta Wing one?
It is the Delta Wing one, yes.
That is big.
And it's a very tiny cockpit for the captain and the first officer. They're sitting very close together, and the windscreen wraps around very tightly. So, yeah, claustrophobic, but in a way it makes sense, because if you're in a very small cockpit, whichever seat you're sitting in, you can reach all the controls. So it's so that if one pilot is incapacitated for any reason, the other can take over.
I don't think I'm built to be a pilot. Too big.
Well, let's have a look at you. You're a little bit taller than me, John, and my legs are very long, so I don't think I could have ever been a jet pilot, even if I'd been able to get over the other difficulties, eyesight, aptitude, and so on. But my femur, top leg bone, is just too long for the ejector seat of the time. So that's one of the things that they measure, that you get measured for, to see whether you could escape in an emergency and so on. And I think perhaps someone might say you need to lose a bit around the middle, John.
Just possibly. I've always said 18 stone is cuddly, though.
I'm not going to make any comment at all, but a lot of our aircraft, particularly our Second World War aircraft, there's not much room inside. Now, I've been in the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight Lancaster, been in all the positions on that, I think, except the mid-upper turret. And when I got into the rear turret, I said to the engineer, look, I can get in. He said, no, you can't. We haven't shut the doors. So it's very tight. And, of course, in the 1940s, people tended to be a bit smaller. Yeah. Having said that, I've met at least 2 or 3 Spitfire pilots who were 6'5", 6'4", that sort of height. And the man who might be said to have won the Battle of Britain, Air Vice Marshal Sir Keith Park, as he was at the time, he was 6'5" and flew a Hurricane regularly. How he managed it, I don't know.
The Drive Time Show with Nigel G every Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. online at seclosounds.org. The best mix of music and fun to wind down your day. Listen out for A Slice of Cheese, The Rotten Tomato and Remember the Bees. Intrigued? Don't miss the Drive Time Show with Nigel G every Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. on seclosounds.org.
You're listening to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. You can contact the show via facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show or via Twitter, which is holiday_hut. This show is a special about the RAF Museum in London. The show's not always about going to far off destinations. The school holidays are coming up. You may need something for the kids or even perhaps yourself to do. So today I'm highlighting the RAF Museum in London. I did cover the Chesington World of Adventures on my show for the 5th of May. So if you haven't heard that one, if you go to seclosounds.org and look for the Listen Again feature, and then search out my name, and then look for the broadcast for the 5th of May when you're about here, all about Chessington World of Adventures. Or you can go to iTunes and just search John Guinn Travel Show, and you'll be able to find it there. Well, let's continue now with my tour around the RAF Museum with David Keane.
This is a Spitfire Mark 5B. So it's the classic Spitfire shape. It looks like one of those Battle of Britain Spitfires. It has a more powerful Merlin engine than they had, and it has much heavier armament. But this particular aircraft has a history. It was used to provide some support for the Dieppe raid in 1942, which turned out to be a ghastly failure with many Canadian, mostly, casualties. What the Dieppe raid proved was that when the time came for a full-scale invasion of mainland Europe to push out the occupying German forces, it couldn't be done through a French port. They were far too heavily defended. So that is why D-Day occurred on the beaches of Normandy, which were still heavily defended, but not as bad as Dieppe or the other ports. So this aeroplane was involved in that, and it has 1 or 2 battle scars. It has a couple of bullet holes which have now been patched up. And it's standing opposite the entrance to our bomber hall, which was an extension put onto this part of the museum in 1983. We discovered pretty soon after we opened in 1972 that we actually needed a lot more space because our artefacts are big. So in 1978 we put up an industrial building to house the aircraft associated with the Battle of Britain, not only another Spitfire and Hurricane, but also what I think is probably the most comprehensive collection of ex-Luftwaffe aircraft to be found anywhere. And that's on the other side of the car park. And then, running out of space again, we put the bomber hall up in 1983 to house the largest aircraft in the collection. And the entrance to the bomber hall is dominated by the Avro Lancaster.
It is a bit, isn't it? It's just there staring at you. It's quite a formidable machine.
Well, it was from 1942 when it came into service, the mainstay of Bomber Command, and Bomber Command in action for the whole of the war, for most of the war, of course, the only means by which the Allies could hit at Germany. And that particular Lancaster flew at least 137 sorties, which, when you consider most of the Allied bombers did something like 25 sorties, that makes it a bit special. Although,
Very lucky one.
very fortunate, although having said that, I couldn't actually show you which bit flew all 137 sorties, because various bits have been changed. It's in the colours of 467 Royal Australian Air Force, that squadron, because that's who it flew with for most of the war. One of its pilots for 1944 was a friend of mine called Max Johnson, and he came from Brisbane in Australia, and he flew that aeroplane 5 times in 1944, and on one occasion he nearly destroyed it because he was attacked by a night fighter, so he put the aeroplane into a steep dive, turning sharply as he went. Now, I got him away from the night fighter, but Max told me that he could hear bullets hitting the starboard wing, although when they got back they found that wasn't the case. There were no bullet holes, but the rivets were popping out, which meant the aircraft was dismantling itself in the air. It was really serious, John.
Yeah.
So it was thought that they were going to scrap it when it returned. The damage was so bad. However, that decision was rescinded. It was sent away and rebuilt, and it flew again.
There's a big bomb underneath it. What weight is that?
Right, that's a 6,000 pound blast bomb. I was going to say that's probably a typical bomb load. More typical, I suppose, was a 4,000 pound blast bomb and a load of incendiaries. And the idea of that would the blast bomb would take the roofs off buildings, the incendiaries would set fire to anything that's left. Of course, the bombing campaign in northern Germany, which resulted in the almost total destruction of many of the great German cities, has been a cause of controversy, but I always ask people to remember that it's no use looking at this from a standpoint of the 21st century. We have to see how it appeared to the commanders in 1942 and 43 and so on, when the outcome of the war was by no means certain. And Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Harris's aim was actually to finish the war as quickly as possible and to save lives by carrying out the bombing offensive. I think perhaps that even his greatest supporters might say he was a little bit obsessed, but however, that's how it appeared at the time. And what we can be absolutely certain about, and there's no argument about this, is that the bombing offensive tied down in Germany a huge number of men and armaments, which the Germans would much prefer to use elsewhere. But they couldn't because they had to defend the Reich. And the other thing which I'd like people to consider is that the people who flew in Bomber Command were all volunteers. Their average age was about 22, and 55,573 of those young men never came back.
I realise it was that high.
It's a huge proportion. That's out of a total force of something like 125,000. And, as I say, the only means by which the Allies could actually hit at Germany for most of the war.
Brave guys.
Indeed. And their courage is not to be underestimated, and thankfully now has been recognised by the memorial in Green Park in London. A lot of public support for that memorial. It made the news with a little bit of graffiti that appeared, but I'd ask people to set that against the use which is made of that memorial by relatives, descendants of those who flew, who go there frequently, leave little tributes, wreaths and so on. So I think for most people it's a positive thing. And we are now trying to raise funds to ensure its upkeep and its continued place in Green Park. It's a very splendid memorial.
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, great.
Join DJ Escudero for My Latinesque Show on Seclo Sounds every Saturday from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. For everything cool and hot, Latin and local, it's Seclo Sounds with DJ Escudero. Para todo cool y caliente, latino y local, escucha a DJ Escudero en Seclo Sounds.
It's not all war machines. It is mostly RAF aircraft with the Royal Air Force Museum, of course, but we now can see a very shiny red helicopter. It's a Wessex, from 32 Squadron, the Queen's flight, and this is the helicopter in which Her Majesty the Queen had her first helicopter flight, and that was in 1977 during her Silver Jubilee year, which just goes to show the longevity of the sovereign service to the country. As I say, a bit shinier than most RAF helicopters, and a little bit more comfortable inside too. It has quite a lot of soundproofing and so on. Now, I understand that the Queen isn't terribly fond of helicopters because of the noise they make. It has carried all the members of the royal family and many of the top political people as well, but its most prolific user was Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother. Now, she loved it because even towards the end of her very long life, she wanted to keep up her strenuous programme of 3 engagements a day, and this helicopter enabled her to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, like many elderly people, the Queen Mother had some trouble with her legs, so she asked if a footstool could be made to rest her legs in between engagements and fitted to the aircraft. And of course that was done, and it's still in the aircraft now, along with another indispensable aid to survival, the gin cabinet.
It's quite a weird shape at the front.
Yes, it is. There's looks like a dome fixed on the front. That contains some of the radar gear. It has 2 engines. This type of aircraft was in service for a very long time. It's in all sorts of roles, transport helicopter, the search and rescue role, and so on. It's now been superseded by the Sea Kings, and they are themselves shortly due to come out of service. Mm-hmm. But the Sea King, a bigger helicopter, which we do not have an example of at the moment, but no doubt we will, because one of our problems as a museum, we are continuing to collect artefacts, mm-hmm. and our artefacts are rather large.
Forever growing. You don't want to put anything off display, do you?
No, it is a bit of a balancing exercise. We do have to consider what will meet the needs of the public, what tells the story of the RAF, what tells aviation's story, and so on. And as these bigger aircraft come out of service, it is a bit of a problem. We do have another museum apart from this site at Hendon in North London, and our other museum is at Cosford in the West Midlands. It adjoins an airfield, which is very handy, and that's where we put most of our largest transport aeroplanes. And it's also the home of the National Cold War exhibition. And when we opened that in 2007, we put, for what we believe was the first time, all 3 of the V bombers under one roof. Mm-hmm. So the Victor, the Valiant and the Vulcan bombers are all there. And it's not just aeroplanes. We tell the social history and other aspects of the Cold War too, so it's a brilliant exhibition to go to. One of the big problems for us, though, was that two of the artefacts, the Thor guided missile and the Valiant bomber, were here at Hendon, and the Valiant was unique, the only one in the world. To get it out, to take it up to Cosford, we had a bit of a problem because it's a very large aeroplane, and in between the position where it was and the door was our Halifax bomber, and our Halifax bomber is still there. Now, our Halifax is again a very important aeroplane dating from the Second World War, but unfortunately this particular Halifax was shot down on its first operation. It caught fire, the pilot brought it down on a frozen lake in Norway. It eventually submerged into the lake, and it stayed there for something like 30 years. So it's in a bit of a state, and we don't want to move it, otherwise we feel we'll probably end up with a pile of aluminium dust. So how do we get the Valiant past that? Well, we knocked a hole in the wall and took it out that way.
Yep, I've been in the MOD, I've seen solutions like that.
It's the kind of thing we have to do. We're approaching now the forward part of a Chinook, and that, of course, is still in service with the Royal Air Force. Great work, how it was. And this particular Chinook represents the famous Chinook Bravo November, which flew in the Falklands conflict. In fact, was the only Chinook which survived, because all the Chinooks were on Atlantic Conveyor, which was hit and sunk, except for Bravo November, BN, and that happened to be on a sortie at the time, so it landed back on HMS Hermes, the aircraft carrier. The idea had been originally that the troops landed in West Falkland would be ferried by Chinook to East Falkland, where the Argentines were dug in. Now that was no longer possible, which led to the famous Marine and Army yomp across Falklands. But Bravo November was used to ferry supplies, round-the-clock flight, flying at very low level, from one end to the other, heavily overloaded. During one of these excursions, the pilot came a little bit close to the water, hit the water, but through his skill managed to extract it from that and carry on flying. And for that he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the DFC. That was Dick Langworthy. Now, the same helicopter was still in service in the first Gulf War in 1991, and again, another pilot flying it, taking, well, I'm not quite sure what he was doing, but probably operating behind enemy lines with special forces, and again, won the DFC. So we have one helicopter, 2 wars, 2 pilots, 2 DFCs. I don't think that's happened with any other aircraft. And we've rigged this one up so that people can go inside and sort of experience a bit what it's like in a Chinook. It doesn't vibrate so much as the real thing. It's not so noisy as the real thing. Not so uncomfortable as the real thing either.
You're listening to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. I'm doing a special on the RAF Museum in Hendon today. But before we continue with a tour of the museum with David Keane, here is some travel news. You've got to love that jingle, haven't you? Yes, I'm sitting here with a frowny face and I've got glasses on to look even more important. The major bit of travel news really is what happens every summer. People leaving their passports until the last moment. The Passport Office is urging holiday makers to apply for their passports in time, as they receive hundreds of calls from parents, holiday makers and business travellers. As an example of how bad it gets in the summer, December there were 175,174 applications, but in July they're expecting over 500,000. They are taking on extra staff during the summer months, but there are still limited appointments for passport offices for fast track and premium services. You have to pay extra if you leave it until the last minute, and even now the flash of the cash may not get you a passport in time. So you do need to check in advance if your passport is valid, which is good information because sometimes you need a passport with at least 6 months left in it on the date you return. So you need to check that anyway. And make sure it's up to date. If you are about to if you're not going to run out but you need to renew it to go away, that's not a problem. The extra time is added to your new passport. Surprisingly, or not, probably, those aged 16 to 20 are most likely to leave it until the last minute to get their passport, with around 70,000 trying this in last July. The Passport Office predicts it will receive around 310,000, well, nearly 311,000 Post Office check and send applications, nearly 104,000 Postal Direct applications, 79,000 electronic applications, 40,000 premium one-day applications, and just over 27,000 fast-track counter applications during July alone. I have had to use the one-day service in the past, which may seem bad being a travel professional, but I got given a free holiday. I wasn't expecting it, so that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. And in January, the one-day service isn't bad. You just pop down to Victoria or pop up to Peterborough, or whatever takes your fancy. Drop off your stuff, go off, do shopping, have a meal, then come back and your passport's all there ready and waiting for you. But if you are going to do the one-day service, make sure you go to the post office to get it checked first. When I was queuing up, loads of people in front of me in the queue were getting to the counter and their application was being rejected because their photographs weren't correct. So fill in your application, pop to the post office, get it checked before you send it off or before you travel down to the passport office to get a new passport. And of course, remember, in 10 years' time when you need to renew it, don't leave it until the last minute again. If you listened to last week's show, you may recall that I had trouble with the security queues at Luton Airport. The queue system sort of broke down and there was some delays. Luton Airport have looked at this. They come back to me and said that one of the guys into the company made a mistake and there's been a training issue brought up and everything should be fine from now. But it wasn't just the queuing that broke down, it's when you got to the x-ray machine too. People weren't ready, weren't prepared. There's notices everywhere, but people weren't paying any attention until they got to the front of the queue. As for the school holidays are coming up, it's going to get really busy. I have flown out on the first day of the school holidays in the past. It's not a thing I would recommend anybody to do. But to make the process easier, I spoke to Oliver from Luton Airport to find out what passengers could do to make sure that they get through the airport quickly and smoothly.
Oliver, I travelled through Luton Airport last week and there was problems with the security queues. There was a mistake and the queues got longer and there's a bit of fuss and bother. But when you get to the x-ray machines, there's still people who are not prepared for the security checks. What could passengers make sure they're prepared for before they get to the x-ray machines?
Well, as you know yourself, John, it's a very busy time for airports around the UK. So passengers being prepared in advance obviously helps everybody get through that little bit easier and that much quicker. So the three key things that we tell passengers is to make sure that you firstly prepare any liquids that you may wish to carry in your hand luggage before you travel. So make sure they're in their 100 millilitres bottles, and make sure you've got a clear resealable plastic bag. The second thing is really just to allow that little bit extra time just to travel to and from the airport, and make sure you can pass through without the anxiety or fear that you might miss your flights. Just allowing those extra 10, 15 minutes can make a big difference. And lastly, really, is the electronic items. They still have to be outside of your hand luggage. So as you arrive at the security channel, just make sure you've got your electrical items and your laptops and things out of your bag and ready to present to the security guards.
Okay, so be prepared. There's plenty of signs down on the ground floor for departures, so they should be able to read those.
Absolutely, and we have those in multiple languages as well.
And you've got the hologram as well, telling people what to do, so
That's right.
They should actually be ready. If somebody hasn't got a plastic bag, what can they do?
Well, as people will know, the security regulations have been in force since 2006. So there's plenty of information out there, whether it's from the airport's website, whether it be on the airline's website, which tells you what you actually need to do. So if you get chance, make sure you've got a clear, resealable plastic bag that you can place your liquids in. If you do find yourself at the airport without one, then there are vending machines where you can easily get one very quickly.
Okay, I have to confess, a few years ago I got through to security and I had a keyring that failed the checks. I wasn't expecting my keyring to be a problem, so you do need to think ahead. But at that time they allowed me to go back through and post it home because it's sentimental value. I didn't want to throw it away, but you do have to be careful about everything, don't you?
We do, and we do offer that facility to all passengers. So if you do find yourself at the central search security area with something that you can't take through, you do get the option to post that back home, so you don't obviously have to lose it.
We're coming up to school holidays, so there's going to be lots of people being dropped off at the airport. You charge now for the dropping off, don't you?
Well, what we do is we make sure we offer lots of different options for different passengers. So for those that want to use the priority pick-up and set-down area, there is a fee to use that facility. But at the same time, if people do not want to pay, there is a 30-minute free pick-up and drop-off from our mid-stay car park, which operates a free shuttle bus, which takes no more than 2 minutes, and that will drop you right outside the main terminal door.
Okay. There's some reports in the press about parking tickets, but I can fully understand why you do that, because the road's quite narrow. You don't want people just stopping and blocking the traffic, do you?
Absolutely, John, and this one is absolutely zero tolerance at the airport. We have one road that accesses the airport, and that gets very busy. We can have some 2,000 vehicle movements per hour on that road. And some of those vehicles are large, articulated lorries, large coaches. And the last thing that we will tolerate is people getting out of their vehicle in the middle of a road and begin to put their passengers onto that road. It not only puts their own lives at risk, but also the lives of others and those drivers that are using that road day in, day out.
Yeah, I'll drop my wife off at the train station. There's people just stopping the road and at roundabouts, and it does get annoying.
Absolutely, and worst of all, it causes a lot of potential congestion with just one person using that road to drop people off.
Is there anything else a passenger can do to make sure they're prepared before visiting your airport?
No, I think that's it. The key things really, just make sure you're aware of the security regulations, because airports do require you to go through that security process. So, as I said, there is plenty of information, be it on the airport's website or your airline's website. So get up to speed really with what the latest regulations are, and just allow that little bit of extra time just so you can obviously enjoy the experience and look forward to your trip away.
Great. One more thing, what's your website?
It's www.london-luton.co.uk.
Okay, great. Thanks, Oliver. Thanks a lot.
Many thanks, John.
According to The Independent on Saturday, British holidaymakers risk running up more than £327 million in extra charges just by flashing their plastic while abroad this summer. This is according to the comparison site Uswitch. Apparently there are costly dangers ahead for those not paying attention when they use their cards by making phone calls or driving a hire car. So the rules are, always make sure you know what you're paying for. You may find that some restaurants will offer you the service of doing a conversion for you into pounds, so you know how many pounds you're spending when you sign the receipt. The general word of advice for this is say no, because you're going on to the exchange rate that the restaurant has set. And in most cases, you're probably better off leaving it to the rate set by your bank or card provider. But do take care when you take cash out. And don't forget to let your bank know that you're taking your card overseas, because it can be an expensive phone call ringing your bank or credit card company trying to get your card authorised because you forgot to do it before you went away. And that's the end of this little bit of travel news. Now to continue with my tour around the RAF Museum in Hendon. We're walking back towards the Spitfire, and you look at it and I think it's a wonderful looking aircraft. But I'm not sure now whether I've been educated by family, TV, media to like the machine, or whether it's just the design of it. What do you think?
I think it's one of those things where it's beautifully engineered and it has a lovely appearance. It looks right. It is right. Occasionally you get this. The designer didn't set out to make it pretty.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the function of a fighter. But when R.J. Mitchell laid down the design of this aircraft, he created a beautiful machine. I compare it, if you like, with a Bugatti racing car. It's that mixture of engineering and artistry.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of the Spitfire, well, that's lovely. Its distinguishing feature, I suppose, for most people, is that elliptical wing, designed purely for practical reasons, and most of the design work for that was carried out by Mitchell's deputy, Joe Smith, because, as you'll recall, R.J. Mitchell himself was tragically struck with cancer. He only ever saw one Spitfire fly. That was the prototype, and he died at the age of 42 in 1937, so wasn't alive at the time when his aircraft were doing the business which they did in the Battle of Britain and beyond. But that lovely curve of the wing gives an enormous surface area and generates a lot of lift, and it compensates for the thinness of the wing, which is incredible. By having this very thin wing, remembering that in the air the wing supports the weight of the whole aircraft and the engine alone weighs 3/4 of a ton, it's remarkable, because using that sort of design, making it so aerodynamically clean, Mitchell was able to extract greater performance from the Merlin engine than Sidney Cam was with the Hurricane. But having said that, I wouldn't want to take anything away from Sidney Cam either, because that prolific designer, whose first frontline aircraft for the Royal Air Force came online in 1930, and the last of his inspired designs was the Harrier, which has only relatively recently come out of service. And in the whole of that time, on the frontline strength of the RAF, there has always been a Cam-inspired design. And in the Battle of Britain, it should be remembered that Hurricane shot down more enemy aircraft than all the other defences put together. But of course, the Spitfire has the glory.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more glamorous machine, and a delight to fly. Very, very responsive.
Have you flown one?
No.
Oh.
That remains an unfulfilled ambition.
Well, there's always time.
It's very expensive.
Yeah. Do you ever fire up the engines?
We'd love to do that. We can't do it with these aircraft. We have to bear in mind that while it is a delight and a great joy to see aircraft like the Spitfire flying, and our friends in the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight do that, of course, you do need another reference point, if you like, and our museum is that. We're like a reference book. So the aircraft don't fly. This one will never fly again, and the reason for that is that we want to preserve it as it was at the time it was made, so that in future years, when people look at a Spitfire, they can come to us and see what the real thing was like. Now, the ones that fly, as I say, it's great to see them flying, but inevitably you have to replace bits that are going to fly.
Yeah.
You've got to replace some of the engine components, hydraulics, electrics, and so on. You couldn't risk a failure in the air. So a lot of components have to be replaced. And of course there is also the temptation, as technology improves, to replace them with bits which are superior. And eventually you'll end up with an aircraft which is quite different from how it was originally conceived. While this museum exists, you'll still be able to go back. And what we've done in the past is supported people who wanted to make replicas, which is perhaps the way to do this. So they can come to us and see what the aircraft originally were like. The Battle of Britain Memorial flight, for example, had a bit of a problem with their mid-upper turret on their Lancaster. It wouldn't rotate, the fairing was wrong, but they came and saw ours and sort of copied it, almost like making dressmakers' patterns with brown paper. The Spanish Air Force wanted to build a replica of the autogyro, the ancestor of all helicopters, because that was invented by a Spanish engineer called Juan de Cierva, and we have an autogyro. So they asked us if we had the drawings, but we actually lent them the whole aircraft, dismantled, and they were able to copy it. And that's something which we like to do. And as a kind of reference book, that's what we can do.
I remember seeing an ad for a copy of Spitfire. I can't remember now, but it weren't cheap.
No.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of money in your back pocket to be able to afford one.
It's very expensive. Sometimes we get letters from people asking if we can arrange for them to fly in the Spitfire. Well, we can't do that. But you would be talking about an enormous amount of money. The maintenance costs is high, and of course they use an awful lot of fuel. It's a 27-litre supercharged engine, and that gets through fuel very quickly.
Yeah, be good on my bike though. Did you get many school visits?
In term time, we get between 100 and 300 children a day on a typical day. Today we have this primary school coming in. They are looking at doing some Second World War studies, and what we do is our educational programs have to be something which the school actually wants rather than what we think they'd like. It has to relate to our collection. We like the children when they come here to be engaged, so not just listening to someone talking, as you're listening to me, but actually to do something. We like them to have fun, and we want to make sure, yes, that it is relevant to what we're about. So that particular class will be going to our wartime class, where they'll learn about what it was like to be at school in 1940, and they'll do this as if they were living the part, with a very strict teacher who will be telling them off. They will be writing with a pen which dips in an inkwell. They'll get covered in ink. It's absolutely brilliant. And halfway through their lesson, the air raid siren will go off. They'll have to take shelter under the desk. They'll also be told that they're not going home at the end of the day, that they're going to be evacuated somewhere else. Now, of course, it can't approach reality, but it does give an insight into what it was like for children their age at the beginning of the Second World War, when hundreds of thousands of children were evacuated from cities like London and sent to stay with people they'd never even met. So it does the business there. And they have a timetable which will cover the whole day, so later on in the day they'll go to our Battle of Britain Hall and see our sound and light show, which we call our finest hour. It lasts for 15 minutes. It's a really good introduction to the Battle of Britain in particular and the Second World War generally, and makes use of archive film, some modern footage, and the real aircraft that actually took part. And that's a really good way of getting the message across. And it runs on the hour, every hour, and that's free to all our visitors who come to the museum. During the school summer holidays, we've got a lot of activities which we hope will prove attractive to families, because it is a great place to visit, even if you just want to look at the aeroplanes, or at the office which Claude Graham-White used, because we restored that to this condition that it was in 2015, and that's quite a fun place to go in and have a look at. But during August, we're offering an Airfix experience, so you can come along and for the price of £2, make an Airfix kit, and get covered in glue and so on. So we hope that will appeal to children.
That takes me back.
Yeah, I think a lot of us started with Biggles and Airfix. We show the natural side of flying also during the school summer holiday with Wild Bird Week. So we will have some falcons and hawks and owls flying with a falcon display team. And I have a quieter session as well, where we have a professional storyteller who will be telling some stories here too. So there's a lot of things going on at the museum, and we'll end up the summer holiday with a Land Army Week and have some animals on site showing the sort of poultry and livestock which people were encouraged to keep during the Second World War. And then that will head up towards our Battle of Britain weekend on the 14th and 15th of September, when we'll focus on that most important event in RAF's history.
So a fair bit on, and it's all free.
All free. It's, as I say, a big site. It's undercover. There's a picnic area indoors. There's a picnic area outdoors. We have a cafe and a full proper service restaurant. Tremendous number of aeroplanes, something like 103 I think today. An interactive science area, good place for the children to play, and while they're playing, to learn, and they don't realise that. And it appeals to children of all ages, I might say. Our sound and light show, which I've mentioned, a little film which runs for 8 minutes on the Dam Busters raid, and we have a special exhibition about that too, as it's the 70th anniversary this year of that event. So, a lot going on, a great deal to see, and a good place to come. Easily reached by the Northern Line, and alight at Colindale Station on the Edgware branch. Or if coming from north of London, the M1 and exit at Junction 4, and it's signposted all the way from there.
That's the way I came down. Yeah, and the roads were clear too.
Good.
One final thing. What's your favourite part of the whole museum?
Oh, wow. Favourite part of the whole museum? I like wandering around the museum just before we open or just after we closed. I like all bits of the museum. I can get excited about anything, but I find almost inevitably I'm drawn back to S for Sugar at Lancaster. And perhaps it's because I've always had an interest in Bomber Command that does the trick for me. But that's a tremendous aeroplane. And I'm very fond of that Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, which powers not only the Lancaster but the Hurricanes, the Spitfires, the Fairey Battle, the Bolton and Paul Defiant, and the P-51 Mustang, an American aeroplane, which got its performance from its Rolls-Royce engine, and so on. So, yeah, I guess just about where we're standing now, John. This is my favourite bit.
Your favourite part. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
The Drive Time Show with Nigel G every Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. online at seclosounds.org. The best mix of music and fun to wind down your day. Listen out for a slice of cheese, the rotten tomato, and remember the bees. Intrigued? Don't miss the Drive Time Show with Nigel G every Monday to Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. on seclosounds.org.
For more information on the RAF Museum, you can visit www.rafmuseum.org.uk. The entry to the museum is free, so there is chargeable pay and display parking, so remember to take some change with you for that. But once you're in, it's free, just pay for your meals and drinks, and of course your FX kits if you want to take some home. There's a couple of flight simulators as well, which may have an extra charge. But it's a good day out. The road network there is pretty good, so if you're travelling down from Milton Keynes, it's not a problem to get there. And it's well worth checking out during the school holidays. You've been listening to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. If you have comments on this show or have suggestions for future shows, you can contact me via facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show or via Twitter, which is at holiday_hut.
All my bags are packed, I'm ready to go. I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye, but the dawn is breaking, it's early morn. Taxi's waiting, he's blowing his horn. Already I'm so lonesome I could cry. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. There's so many times I've let you down, so many times I've played around. I tell you now, they don't mean a thing. Every place I go, I think of you. Every song I sing for you. When I come back, I'll wear your wedding ring. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. I'm a-leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Oh, babe, I hate to go. Now the time has come to leave you. One more time, let me kiss you. Then close your eyes, I'll be on my way. Dream about the days to come when I won't have to leave alone. About the time I won't have to say. Kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Oh, babe, I hate to go.
MK Pulse proudly sponsors Seclo Sounds. MK Pulse is Milton Keynes' local magazine, bringing helpful information on food, health, fashion, money, travel, culture, and much more to 66,000 readers every month. Plus news, views, and what's on from around the city. If it's happening in Milton Keynes, it's in MK Pulse, and it's available online at www.mkpulse.co.uk. MK Pulse and Seclo Sounds, the heart and soul of the city.